me do it. Also, for everyone that's here, I guess, we are recording it. It's, I believe, just so that um, bits and pieces of the recordings can be used for promotional reasons. And if you do want a copy of it, like we do, and I'm sure we can share it. But thanks so much for joining. We got like a pretty full house, and based on however the workshop's organized, we could probably do intros. But awesome. It's our last workshop for the week, and it wraps up like the second week of the new Shining Moon workshop series, which is super awesome. We can snap to that. Um, and this initiative is brought to us by Northern Lights Collaborative, YLC, Catalyst X, and Coach Katrina. It's also sponsored by the Ontario Trillium Foundation's Youth Opportunities Fund. We have workshops for 2 more weeks, almost every day during the weekday. So if you find a spare minute, check out our social media pages. They are constantly updating with information on what's happening and how to join. So I guess housekeeping wise, I can control if someone doesn't know like how to mute their own mic, but generally like mute your mic when you're not speaking so that the person who is speaking isn't getting interrupted by the sounds, like background sounds that you might be creating without knowing. Using the chat box, usually when I personally have meetings, we use an asterisk. So just like drop an asterisk, which means like to the speaker that like you have something to say. And that's like a pretty good way of keeping a speakers list. The chat box can be found at the bottom tab. For the folks joining here, I'm going to drop a Google survey link. Basically, just surveys are a really important way for us to get feedback on how you received the information that we've organized for you. At the end, basically when you fill out the Google form, your name goes into a draw for a gift card for a local grocery store in your area. So even if you don't need the money, it's great to like give it away, especially in times like this. Today we have Shays talking to us about marketing and leadership in that, I believe, and I will have him introduce the workshop as well as himself.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for the big introduction. Yeah, my name is Shay. I'm self-employed, own my own marketing company, Big Mouth Marketing, but I have an extensive history in politics. I've been involved since I was like 14 years old, actually, and pretty steady involvement up from there. So the big focus, I think I was asked to speak on a lot of different things, but we're going to do communication and public speaking are kind of the leading two, and as well as linking leadership into that and how that kind of stuff interacts with the rest of it. I do want to just take, once we get going here underway, before I start getting into the main presentation, I want to open it up. I know, I think just to people that are here so far, if you guys have any specific questions about like right off the hop that I may, if I don't cover, I will address up front. But then again, too, I like the idea of just putting a star in the chat if you want to, if you have a question, and I encourage you to interrupt me while I'm talking. I don't want you to have to sit on it for the whole time. So if you do have a question, just star in the chat. We'll make sure you can ask that. But I don't know. I'm just looking left to right on my screen here. Lee's the first head I can see. Do you have any specific questions that you wanted addressed in this, or are you ready to get the show on the road?
I don't have much. I'm curious about the stump speech parts, how to deliver like the elevator speech messaging. I think is always really useful. So I'd love for you to touch on that. But grateful to be here.
And what about you, Justin? You got anything?
I mean, I would say when it comes to like social media, maybe if you could touch on something along those lines, that would be cool.
Perfect. 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 And then I'm looking here. It looks like Katrina's up and about, so I don't want to spring one on her if she's not ready. But
I'm listening. I'm listening.
okay, perfect. Do you have any questions?
I'm a good multitasker. No, I love learning about everything because I believe that I can improve in everything. So I'm just, again, grateful to be here and yeah, excited to listen in.
Perfect. Thanks for coming. All righty. So the first big kind of step that I had here, just pulling up my stuff, was kind of this opening with communication, because that's kind of threaded into public speaking and leadership. So that's kind of the big one that I wanted to talk about first. So the first thing I have there is that and now more than ever, communication has to be a priority, and it has to be a skill that you possess to succeed in almost any job that you're trying to get into or you're preparing for. It is so key, and the easiest, it's going to sound kind of ridiculous, but the best advice that I ever got on this topic, and that I actually applied and did myself, was starting my own vlog series that I did initially. I never posted them. I just would, if something came up, it was a news topic, being political, it was usually that for me. But even if it's hockey, or like, again, another thing for me, but sports, like an activity, a hobby, anything that you like, that's the best way. And we have it so accessible now more than ever. That's the best way to really kind of experiment and work off of that. Because I can tell you, I did a podcast for about a year, and at the start, if you listen to my first ever episode compared to my last episode, it's day and night. It's completely different. And the only thing was, I had just done it 52 times in between, or I guess 50 times in between. So the big thing I highly recommend, and like I said, you record them for your own use. You can go back and you can say, okay, like, you can critique yourself, which is a big thing. And then once you're more comfortable with them, start posting them. Create a little Facebook page. Like, one of the questions was about social media. I didn't answer it directly because I touched on it a bit throughout here, but that is one of the big ones. Is once you're comfortable and get it at a level, post some things like that, because then that will, people that you trust, you can ask for feedback. And the people that'll watch it, especially at the initial stage, are going to be people that are close to you, likely, and so are great people to get honest feedback from. And that will show you, like, that's the best thing I ever did, was post that kind of content, because then the feedback I got from people was like hugely informed. Okay, whether it was language I was using too big of words, or too simple, whatever it is, or I was too energetic, I was talking too fast. It could be like any of those things. So you want to get that practice in. And like I said, don't feel like you have to post them. Just record one, watch it, and you can get rid of it after. But that's a great first step into becoming an effective communicator. And when you listen, the big thing too, once you make a video, whatever your topic is about, make sure that you've actually got that across, because sometimes you can get you can go off course, you can ramble on. A huge thing about communication, and Lee kind of asked about the elevator pitch, you have to be very tight in what your subject is, and make sure you're communicating that in as effective and simple and quick as a way as you possibly can, which is kind of my second point, which is the simplify and stay on message. Like, I find one of the big questions I got from a lot of people, I will, thank you, Lee. One of the big questions I got from a lot of people was about kind of what language to use, and people were worried that their language was too simplistic. And that is like the opposite of what you want in an effective communication. Kind of trumped up language where, whether it's highbrow or academic, whatever you want to classify it as, the downside of using that is that you're cutting off people that are going to be able to understand what you're trying to say. And if I'm communicating with you and I use words that I have to stop and explain, or you don't know and you're embarrassed to ask, so my point just went over your head, and I haven't been communicating at all. Justin, I saw your little star pop up.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment to what you're talking about with the elevator pitch. And I hate to be the person that's making a comment. I know it's supposed to be meant for questions, but I think
No, it's
that oftentimes a lot of us in this room right now are people that have to apply for grants and money on in our jobs and stuff like that. And over the years, something that I've come to really understand is that the elevator pitch translates into like writing your grants, your proposals, and stuff like that too. Like the most important thing is pretending that you're applying to someone who's completely stupid, right? They don't know anything about what you do, and I think oftentimes we kind of forget about that. And so I always say, like, start off with like simplifying exactly who you are, what you want, and what you need in order to get there, right off the bat, so that it's very clear. And I think it's kind of similar to this elevator pitch idea.
Yeah, for sure, and that's the big thing is it is kind of almost crass to say, but I touch on it a bit in the public speaking side of this, but assume that you're talking to an infant and you're trying to mold their understanding of whatever it is you're talking about. Like someone that, like in the most basic, clear sense, how can you get, like you said, if it's an elevator pitch or something, if it's a grant stuff, like, that got stuff like this all done, you need to be concise but also engaging. And that's where the simplification comes on. If I get two kind of applications in front of me, and in one it's a 2-paragraph, I understand who they are, what the organization is, and what their mission is, but then I get this other one that's 4 pages and is incredibly bloated and is going into way more detail than is necessary. Like it's natural, people are just gonna zone out. So as condensed and as concise as you can be, and clear, that's always going to win. So like long form stuff, in terms of one-way communication is never a good idea if you can avoid it. So just getting back on track. And this is another thing too, was my third step is engaging people. Like you'll notice, like how I opened this was put the floor first to everybody else. What is it that you guys are wanting to get out of this? Like what are the goals, what questions, anything like that you guys may have. That's kind of a big step, because if you can understand where everybody else is coming from, what they're wanting to get out of it, it's going to help you deliver your message much better. If like I said, if I have 3 topics and if someone's only here for one of them or is here for a completely different reason, we're going to have a better understanding on where things like that are going. And it's just a better way, because if they're, again, you want to make, as much as this is, can be a one-way medium, you want to make people engage, so they're not being talked at, they're being talked to. And then when they do ask questions or weigh in, engage with it. Don't, oh, thank you for your comment, and just and just pass along. Engage with it in the moment. Even if you address it later, give it a little bit of a discussion when it comes to you, because it'll pay it off. And then once you have it, like again in this presentation, for example, if it comes up later, you can say, we kind of touched on this, but just as another reminder, and you can glance by it because you've already kind of now touched on it twice. And again, kind of loops in with that third step, is take time to respond. Think about, while people are asking, or like I said, I love that Justin kind of popped up, because that was a good example, is listen to what they're saying, whether it's a question or a comment, and engage with what they are saying, because it's going to be more effective and clear. Maybe somebody else would have the same, in this case it was a comment, but maybe somebody else had a similar question, and you've just answered that for the group now because someone else had spoke up. And this is again now a little bit more general as far as communicating, less about speaking, but communication in general. You have to make sure that you are understood when you're communicating with someone. Don't blame the other person for not understanding. Look for ways to clarify or rephrase what you're trying to say so it can be understood. Like I said, and like Justin said, simplify, concise and clear. I cannot stress that enough. That is the biggest point I can make. If you take one lesson away from that, of this whole thing, let it be that, because that's a huge, huge point. And then another thing, it may seem redundant, but the more you deal with people, you'll realize that this is a skill that not enough people have, is listening, developing your listening skills, because the best communicators are almost always the best listeners. Don't have, listen without judgment, and don't be distracted by thinking about what you want to say next. Respond and don't react. You have to be ever present in the moment. I thank you, Justin, for starting this, because I'm going to use you a lot until somebody else jumps in. But when Justin comes in, I'm laser focused on whatever he's saying. I'm not going, okay, when he's done, my next point is what? Because I'm not engaging with him. He could tell if I didn't. And then if if we just had a bad interaction there, and again, if this is even a bigger crowd, he's going to tune out. He's going to be, okay, well, I'm not being listened to. I'm not getting the questions I want answered. And that's a way people will tune out, if they feel like you're not understanding what they want and where they're coming from. Another big one, step 6, if you're keeping track that way, is body language. Varying studies have different numbers, but the lowest I can find is about 65% of communication is nonverbal. So, watching for visual signs that your listener understands, agrees, or disagrees with your message, and always be aware that your body is sending signals too. So that, means all kinds of things. But again, something as simple as when Justin's talking, I'm not looking away. I'm not, playing with my phone. I'm engaged. I'm making, if it's an in-person thing, I'm staring at my camera, but you're making eye contact with somebody. You're engaged with them. You're listening to them, and you're present in the moment. And that again goes for your communication too. As far as being engaged that way with people. And then it may again seem somewhat simplistic, but the last one I have for and I just kind of touched on it a little bit, but the last for communication in general is maintaining eye contact. Whether it's speaking in a big crowd or one-on-one, maintaining eye contact builds credibility and demonstrates that you care about your listeners. I talk about it in the public speaking part too, but one of the things you'll see is people that when you're giving a public speech, for example, people will scan, and scanning's never good. You want to look at someone, say a sentence, and then jump in. But Justin, start again, so let's get him back in here.
This time it's a question. So I think that when I catch a glimpse of myself on Zoom, I just look like I have the worst resting bitch face. And I feel like I'm totally not approachable. And I'm curious how, now in the times that we're in right now, how do you think that that appearance, like that, what did you call it? Sort of the physical.
Well, just kind of your stationary pose is what I refer to it as, like if I'm talking about it technically, but that you want to be present and engaged with stuff. But yeah, my favorite. Go ahead, finish your question.
Well, I just think that I can appear to be. I just realized that in these sorts of scenarios, I look very not engaged and I look very almost angry, but I swear I'm not. So I'm just curious, what do you recommend, or how do I, address that for myself?
One of the big things I do with these personally, and it's a conscious decision that I made early on, was nodding and shaking your head to the point. You know, like I'm like just in this meeting alone, I'm looking at myself, I'm looking at whoever's, in this case Justin, I'm looking at who's talking, I'm also scanning to see who's coming in, and then sometimes looking right into the camera. So there's a bunch of different things, especially in these online meetings that so many people are having to do right now, that are pulling your attention, as opposed to being that one-on-one human contact. The best way I show engagement is by, like, when someone says something, nodding your head and acknowledging that that's happening, because as much as you're looking around or you're typing or whatever else it is that you're doing, I can see, okay, like I see people nodding along to what I'm saying, so people are understanding, people are getting it, or someone looks confused or whatever it is. You got to kind of read that, and that's how I do it, because it makes the person that is communicating feel like they are being heard and they're not talking at a wall. My favorite example, though, of what you talked about, you know, whatever your political opinions are aside, Tucker Carlson has the absolute best face for when other people are talking. When they do like the Fox News split screen and whoever his guest is on one side, he's always like so confused looking at what they're saying. And there's all kinds of memes about it. I encourage anyone to look them up because they are really, really funny. But he's got the weirdest like listening face, and he doesn't really nod often, so he just kind of sits there and looks kind of perplexed. He's listening intently, but his resting face is one of confusion, I guess. So but that's what I recommend there, and like I said, that's what I do. I make a conscious choice to do it. Leah, I didn't see your little star under your hands emoji there, so I'll pass it over to you, buddy. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you for validating me. But the hands emoji was when you were all saying things I agreed with. So it's like, yes, absolutely. And I would say Vivian Lee has the best resting bitch face ever. So I think that you're doing just fine there, boss. Don't worry. My question, though, you gave a perfect lead in, which was talking about, you just mentioned Fox News. There's a contentious area of conversation amongst a bunch of more or less, socially active folks. This is a good conversation opportunity because, you and I have pretty different opinions on a lot of respects. I would love to hear your perspective, and I'd love for you to tell us a bit about how to engage, like you just talked about very thoroughly for the last 20 plus minutes, except with people who genuinely don't want to see the world the way you do. Not merely people who are dismissive because they're not understanding or comprehending, or they're sidetracked or whatever the case. The accidental piece is one thing, but I'd love to hear some of your thoughts of how to market to people who intentionally want to dismiss you, because a lot of us are activists, and I think that's something we face a lot of. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's such a tough one, because that to me is one that requires you to be a pretty versed expert in the kind of steps that I've just discussed, and the things that I will discuss further, because and this is going to be true even if you're the best communicator of all time. You will never get through with someone that's not engaging with you on a good faith basis. That's just the truth. If I'm coming in and I actually have no interest, and like you kind of just brought up Fox News, like the mainstream media kind of communication, the way of communicating traditionally is dying, in the sense that people aren't, fans anymore of whether it's CNN, Fox News, or whatever else, doing these 2-minute segments where, you have 45 seconds to get your point across. And those people are not, when you're in such a tight, cramped time frame, you're not engaging with the other person. If anything, you're looking for things that you can specifically attack them on in your 45 seconds. And so one of the best things I find to engage with those people in a more good faith basis is giving out yourself a forum for long form engagements. Don't condense yourself down to small time frames, because then it's more kind of adversarial, I guess, and you're less likely to make a credible point in 25-45 seconds, but you're also less likely to engage with whatever your opponent or, person that you disagree with is saying too. Like you mentioned, like I brought up my podcast, and you had mentioned that you and I disagree on quite a lot. And that's true, but you and I we sat down for hour-long shows minimum that always went overtime. They never went under time, and we never touched on all the topics that we wanted to touch on. But I actually think the appetite for that as well is going way up. Like Joe Rogan, again, whether you like the guy or not, his podcasts run 3 hours and get millions of views on them. Like, there's a serious appetite for long form conversations, and he has people on there from every possible topic you can think of. He probably had some like yourself the opportunity, uh, recognizing the situation. Gotta again just recognize that not every situation one's on a good basis in that sense. And so you're kind of you're going to struggle. In case two, my recommendation, I guess, is to try and present yourself as non-combative and ideological, or whatever your thing is. Like, try to again come across as attentive when your opponent is speaking. If you come across as the better person in those kinds of interactions, people that view it decide with you, and then are more open to your viewpoint or topic or whatever it is that you're discussing. And so, again, coming across as the better person in the case situations, you're engaging with someone that really doesn't, or is actively trying to put down whatever it is you're trying to say. To me, those are the best situations and solutions for that. I hope I answered that. I know it was kind of a variety of different points touched on, but okay, I'm getting a thumbs up. So far so good. We'll jump now into kind of public speaking. And this is, again, something that I prefer, shockingly enough, to maybe Lee and some other people that see this and know me. I actually prefer to be a more behind the scenes type of person. But I've been thrust into positions quite frequently where I've had to be, in front of a crowd and talking, and all kinds of stuff like that. So there's a lot of things, and then, some tips that I can pass on. The first thing I'll just say out of the gate is that, again, like similar to the communication thing and the vlog recommendation, the more you do it, the better at it you get. That's just, the mantra of practice makes perfect in communication. That's really the thing. Again, like I look at like the first speech I did, kind of as a teenager, adult, slasher there, kind of, and watching that versus watching, I just did a nonprofit group of nonprofits on marketing and things to help them out. And just the contrast between that and, then and then is huge. And it's, again, all of that to me was just kind of natural thing that you pick and learn as time goes on. But I'm going to kind of go in chronological order of what kind of like a public speech would be. Once you've established whatever your message is, this is how you can effectively communicate it. And the big thing laughs off so many people. Like, if you're on a stage and you gotta like walk out, take your time to set your pace, take a drink, set your water down, relax, because what that conveys to the audience is that you are in control. You're not worried about anything else. You're not worried about how many people are there. You don't, like I said, don't even do. You can smile and leave or whatever if you feel like, but you don't be like, oh my wow, so many people, because that will make you eternally nervous. You mean it to or not. You will freak yourself out if you're talking to, like I said, that'll still happen to me. I've talked in the big crowds, and I'll walk out in a crowd of 10, I'm like, oh my God, there's 10 people here, and I just melt myself out. So you don't want to do that. Just be calm and in control. Walk out, set yourself up, get ready to go. Like, some people think it's a really good thing, like, you come by in the curtain, be like, hello, everybody, hello, anyway, and like talk through while you're getting set up about just kind of like, how's the weather and wow, crazy time. Don't do that, because you're just kind of wait time, and people are, mostly just interested in that kind of small talk. And so, just take your time, get ready, set up, and then begin with what you're gonna say, because, like I said, it'll calm you down for the rest of it, but it also demonstrates to your audience that you're in control, and it gives them a sense of, pay attention. And then this kind of is part of the whole eye contact thing that I mentioned earlier. But step 2 for public speaking is try and connect at least once with everybody in front of you, and make it feel real. You aren't talking to 100 people. Make them feel like you're talking to them. And that's a big one. Like with the eye contact, I said, deliver a sentence. Don't do the pan and scan, because that feels disconnected. Like, you'll notice it. I noticed it when I was in school a lot for some reason. But that was kind of, I guess, maybe because I was partly learning communication. But I would always notice whether it was a professor or a lecturer or whatever it was, when they would look at me and say something. And it makes you feel engaged again, because the big thing. It's easier to communicate one-on-one and engage with someone one-on-one with the eye contact and the sitting and listening. But when you're doing kind of a public speech to a bunch of people, you're gonna, it's just a lot less personal than it could be. And so that's why, like I said, just take your time and bounce side to side too, and just like look at person. Like I say, you don't have to do everybody, and depending on the size of the crowd, that would be impossible. Like I said, just one sentence even, or one thought. Just look at somebody and say, what it is, and get it, because that like will, for whatever reason, it's just a psychological thing, will stick with someone and make them feel like they're being talked to, and in turn make them pay more attention to what you're saying, which is, if you're in public speaking, is what you want. That's a big step there. And this is something that you guys, my third point here, that you can tell probably watching master this part of myself, but slow down. Slow your pace. Don't rush through. Don't be a mile a minute. Like the big thing about public speaking is your time frame. Like, obviously everything is time crunched, and you only have so amount of time. Whether you rehearse ahead of time is kind of subjective. If you find helps you, then absolutely do that. Try, no matter what happens in this, more of a forum like this is where people can jump in. Time something for your time, but if you leave it open for questions, of that time slot can get eaten up with that. So don't panic about all that kind of stuff, and just, relax and get your points, through and across that way. Because if you're rushing at people a mile a minute and jumping from point to point, it's just not going to be comprehended by most of the people watching. Or listening, whatever the circumstances that you're doing your speaking. Now, this is kind of a big point here too. Be grateful to your audience, even if you're the one that's there to teach them or inform them. you are taking up their valuable time. So make sure they know how much you appreciate it. And that again is, I'll encourage, again, depending on the setting, to get a gauge, if you can, because, and again, it was a good thing, eye contact, to and make it more, make them feel like you're glad they're there. I like, again, what is kind of all the grand design, but I point saying here, go out there, that's always, you're always about. So if they feel like their attendance is appreciated, they're going, again, to be engaged. They're going to feel, and this can be, simple things like, thank you all for coming, like at the start, and being relaxed will help that. And, whether you sprinkle jokes, things like that, to make it engaging and make smile while you're talking, will, again, make it feel like it was worth their time, that you appreciated them being here, and you wanted to make it fun, enjoyable, and entertaining for them, even if it is informative. So that's always a really big thing too, to get across effectively, if you can. One of the questions, and we did touch on this too, one of the things I got when I was putting this together was this misconception that big words are better. That's, again, so not the case. Like, a lot of, I don't want to call him out, but I know he won't mind. My old admin, Parnell, he went on, he was the legislative assistant, so, the technical language was his wheelhouse, and that involved him doing a lot of press releases and write-ups and things like that. And part of why him and I worked so well together was I could boil down all of his technical stuff into a much more digestible thing. And that is a skill that I don't think actually enough. Like, I don't think that's and Chad and I are lucky because we have that kind of synergy where we could work that way. But the biggest thing, again, is and it sounds kind of almost bad, but if I'm reading something that I don't understand, I feel stupid and I'm disengaged from what I'm reading, because either point I care, because I don't know what they're trying to say. And if you feel like that Lester, that you don't understand, you won't engage, you won't comprehend, and effectively your communication that you did just failed because someone didn't understand what you're trying to say. I saw another star from Justin, so pop that back in.
Sorry, I'm being.
No, this is great. I was worried no one would have questions. It'd just be me talking.
I was just gonna say on your last point there about, like, I was asked to officiate a wedding a couple of years ago, and it was last November. It was in Mexico, and when they asked me, I said, "Yeah, of course, yeah, I'd love to." But I didn't really think about it for a long time. But then when it was coming up to the wedding, I was, what have I done? I've done a lot or whatever. And there's always like a certain level of like nervousness. But then when it's somebody's wedding and you don't want to screw things up, like there was so much pressure. And I was like the most nervous I've ever been to speak. And when it came, like, we were on the beach and I'm in a suit and I'm just like sweating. It's gross. There's enough wind that like I had like this clipboard with everything written on it, and it's like flying all over the place. And I just had to kind of like laugh about the situation, and the crowd laughs about the situation, and you just kind of find that groove, right, where things just aren't perfect. And that includes when you're up on a stage talking to a huge crowd of people. And I think people get that, right?
Yep.
And the best thing was, after the wedding, I was like, oh my God, I was nervous, and they were like sweating. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm saying this to the couple, and they're like, no, that's exactly why we asked you, is because we knew that you could like get through that stuff, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I never thought of that, but like that's, I guess, maybe a part of my personality that like, yeah, I can just like get on with it. Stuff happens and you just move on, right?
Yeah. I'll just touch on this quickly, Katrina, before I take your question. But that to me is like a completely separate skill of its own. As much as when you're public speaking and all the things that I've kind of touched on, I personally encourage, if you're at the stage where you're kind of a blank canvas and you're trying to figure out what your public speaking or your communication structure is, to try and not have it. If it's a speech, try not to have it written out word for word, because you have to be able to adapt to the situation. And those are the situations like you just laid out that are exactly the kind, like that is the most like high stress situation you can possibly be in. This is supposed to be something these people only ever do once in their lives, and it's going to be forever. And you have that pressure to, make sure you get that right. And you will be nervous, but the thing about it is everybody else in that situation is nervous for you too. You're all in the same boat. You all understand the situation, the importance of it, and your ability to kind of go with the flow. You have to be able to adapt. And so, leaving, if and the only reason I kind of brought up the speech part is if you have it written out verbatim. Part of, I found just in my experience, is people that do have things kind of fully fledged out, if anything goes off course, they go off course. If they screwed up isn't or something, they absolutely, instead of just going, is, and correcting yourself, which is totally fine, they will be so flustered that they've now just messed up, or they forgot a line or whatever it is, and that will derail the whole thing. And you will just be more stressed, and then as you worse, you'll feel worse, and like I said, it's like a snowball down the mountain. Like it'll just explode into something huge. So your biggest thing is to be as relaxed as possible and adapt as possible. If there's a jerk in the crowd, like you're getting heckled or something, people are going to be displeased with that person because they're there to either hear or learn from you. So, acknowledge, like, understand the kind of situation you're in, and understand where the crowd's kind of, I don't want to say loyalty lies, but where that crowd loyalty lies, I guess, is the best way I can come up with something. But because if people are there to hear you, you don't have to kowtow to someone that's like heckling you or stressing you out, because, everybody else is annoyed with that person too. But yeah, like that to me is like a huge skill. And to me is like the biggest thing. You have to be adaptable, have to be able to go with the flow. And that all kind of comes into the being relaxed. And like I said, no matter what it is, even if it's a wedding thing, if you mess up so bad, like that's funny too. Like I've seen it happen myself. And so just kind of having those moments, like I said, just play with it. And just like I said, and that's one of those things too, that the vlog and the thing I kind of talked about, do often. Because that will help you be naturally quicker if things happen. My dog jumps up into my lap, things will happen naturally. If you're doing a Zoom meeting and your significant other walks in not wearing enough clothes, like you gotta play with it. And so, just be able to do that kind of stuff and have fun with it. That's always the biggest thing, is no matter how serious the topic is, if your first goal is to convey them in a fun way, that's always the most effective way. But Anyway, I don't want to keep going. Been sitting there too long.
Thanks. Yeah, when I think about how I can be better at communicating and where I've had to adapt and then the humor just comes out and I've been able to control situations that there was no control in. So that skill I know is something I'm okay with. The things that I struggle with, because I do have to do like public speaking, I guess, a lot. As you said, like writing everything out. Unless I get it down, I rehearse like the entire like week, 2 weeks before. It just plays in my head and plays in my head, and I'm like having these like conversations with myself, not actually speaking it out loud, but just like laying, and the words are just like, how can I say this? And so then I'll like obsess over it. But the thought of like sitting and typing was not for me. So then I started to do voice to text. I found that helpful, but then when I would bring like this 12-page text, I began room. This I pretty my other thing I struggle with is keeping all get sidetracked and always I am all very and passionate and bad. Again, I know is like being able to be concise, emotions, kind of check some, and then like obsess about that. And
Yeah, for sure. And that's that's kind of it's such a process for everybody. Like I've gone through all the steps, speech, like I write the whole thing out, but I just paragraph thing. Like I find it like everyone will be different. Um, the reading the room too is looking at, and because again, if maybe some of it like your neighbors, McAllen, as long as you have it compartmentalized in the theme, you can change your life relatively stress-free manner. Picked up over there. The concise thing to and this is the is there's going to be the part where kind of prepared because you've had time to refine it and come up with whatever things you want to say in details. And you'll even notice, like, I love doing this like this because I can call out my own examples just from this moment. You'll notice that my points that I have that are kind of my prepared things, I'm marking one last question because I had the time to prepare for that question and kind of pre-answer it in my head. So that's kind of part of what I kind of said about being an effective listener is you have to be listening to what the person is saying because and that actually more is and that is huge because again if there was like you can't use Katrina as an example but like introduction there. And I was actually just asked, you're gonna kind of be like clearly I will attend. And that means why I pay, and then you kind of get human connection of a conversation disconnected and you disengage. I do want to touch on the doing one things first, big thing opposed every year, and I don't rehearse it. But in those situations too, you're in a situation where you are you're gonna do and maybe you prepared, you know that it's, yeah, to consolidate that. So if you're in that situation where you're stressed, so you know, some more, emotion, and that day too, like especially if it's a cause, you know, warrants some emotion. It shows that you're engaged and that you care and that you're invested and that this matters. So I would stress, but trying to did my bell. Let's talk about it. And we should, because it was just because I had never done anything like that. It just was just it didn't. And so that's one tips if you're trying to avoid the emotional stuff. Try, and that doesn't have to mean write the whole scene. This I know this emotional um and it won't stop and folding them. So but yeah, they that's one speakers, and especially because you have leeway. A lot of people don't understand that. The audience is automatically sympathetic to wow. Like, giant group people, like 5 people, actually out in Charles. The speaker has an inherent sympathy built in. With that, yeah, I would say don't freak yourself out about it because, like I said, you have that leeway with people, and it's not gonna harm your message or anything like that. So my last kind of points, I just want to, because I'm getting somewhat close to time here, but again, just about vocabulary. Like the idea that big words are better is odd. It's so not the case. I wish more people understood that. And I just kind of pulled some excerpts from famous quotes from speeches that kind of stick with people because what makes, and I'll read these. What makes them so good is that, like, in my opinion, I have a terrible lack of imagination. If I read a book, I cannot picture in my head. I cannot create the characters. I can't create the setting. Like when I was a kid and I watched Harry Potter. Once I saw the movie and I knew what they looked like, then I could read the books fine because I knew what the school looked like. I knew who the characters were, right? And that made it a lot easier for me. But if you're less imaginative, the thing that makes effective speeches so good is that even for people like me, the picture painted, I can paint myself. You give me the words, I can see what you're talking about. And just one of the I just kind of pulled some excerpts up, but the JFK inauguration speech, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, right? A huge, powerful message that, has withstood the test of time and is this huge quote. And it's because it's such a simple, there's no big words. It's not a complicated thing to understand. It's very clear and concise, and you understand what it means. Martin Luther King, I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, right? You feel the emotion because it's in a language that is universal and that everybody can understand. And that's, again, and the last one I kind of pulled up was Obama. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones that we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. Again, simple language, old English stuff, or we had modern English, still good things there. Properly, universality communication is so important because trying to get something up, trying to get heard, but make it quick, little jabs and things like that that are just more just far like even in those kind of more tech where there's maybe this understanding that this will be a little higher concept or a higher level, it's still good if you can boil your points down in a universal language that's going to connect more, period. And so I always try and recommend, for me and how I did it with my work and stuff is, Chad would come up with his thing and I would take it and just kind of essentially, dumb it down for myself so I understood it. And like that to me is the most effective way to get that stuff done. And that pretty much sums up the the specific points I had. But again, just the general advice, I had a few points. Be relaxed and don't lock yourself into a roadmap. Be happy. We've talked about that. Put up as few obstacles for yourself as possible. And the best thing, it's kind of universal message in a way that is will always be, if you're speaking from the heart and it sounds like your words to your voice, it's gonna punch harder. People are gonna understand that. And like one of my favorite little op-ed, right, actually because of my job, and when I just share